Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Welcome to Saturday Night Scary Stories on the Scary Stories NYC channel. I'm your hostess, Madeline Starr. Tonight, things get real at the Halloween haunted house as Bryan and Jenny confront real evil there. But first, let's rejoin Marcia and her boyfriend in the boyfriend's own words as life with Dogman continues.
The Dogman walked out of the patch of woods directly onto the sidewalk right across the street from myself and Marcia. She was behind me, ringing all the buzzers on the intercom of the building there. Nobody was out on the street that night, neither walking nor driving. We were essentially cornered because we had no place to run to that we could reach before that hideous Dogman could reach us. I say hideous because this particular dog-headed, upright, walking, hairy creature was somewhat atypical of the kind we had been seeing infest the town. This one seemed older. It seemed as though it had survived many battles, and some of them just barely. And yet, you could see it still had its wits about it, and you could see it was fast and wily. Its fur was striped, multiple layers of gray on gray on gray. Even its face was striped on the cheeks. I tried to count them, but there were so many shades of gray that even in the dim light, he had too many stripes to count. It had teeth unlike any of the Dogmen I'd seen so far, just terrifyingly long, almost cartoonishly long. I would say comically long, like a saber-toothed tiger, but there was nothing comical about the situation to me at that time. It seemed to have broken bones and broken skin and broken everything, and that made me wonder what possibly could have been stronger than this thing. Was it fist fighting with elephants or something? You know, they say that Dogman could have glowing eyes. Well, this one had one bluish white eye that reminded me of a soft-boiled egg, and one bright red bloodshot eye that twitched and quivered a lot. It had a long wolf-like snout, but the ridiculously long saber teeth made me think of a wild boar at points. Although its skin hung loosely as though it had lost a lot of weight, this was still a formidable and most likely deadly opponent for any man, maybe even for any team of men. An older, beat-up Dogman is still superior to a top human athlete in my personal opinion. Obviously, that's not something you'd be able to measure too easily. Still, the way I'd seen them go from standing idle to speeding away, like turning on a light switch, I don't think a human being could ever compare to that athleticism and explosiveness. This monster slouched, it leaned on a tree, and it panted constantly, sounding a bit asthmatic while doing so. It didn't matter. It could still do myself and my girlfriend in so quickly that you wouldn't know what you were watching on the security tape footage when you viewed it later on. Just some kind of super fast blur, that's all. I looked at the thing in its eyes, trying to understand what it wanted with us. The red eye on it didn't seem to care. It looked at me, then at Marcia, then back at me. I started to wonder if it was going to go away and leave us alone when Marcia's dad pulled the car to a stop and said, "Here we are. You two have fun tonight." We were back in the car, staring at each other. Marcia didn't look like she'd just been chased by a dogman. She looked perfect. Every hair in place and elaborate, yet subtle, makeup. "Well, isn't this the right address?" asked Marcia's father. We both bent to look outside and clunked our heads together by accident, causing all three of us to chuckle. "Oh, Daddy, I'm not sure I want to go out anymore," Marcia laughed. Her father thought she was referring to our meeting of the minds just then, but I knew better. She just didn't want to go out and relive what we had just lived through. We found ourselves on the sidewalk in front of the nightclub again. "What if we went in this time?" asked Marcia. I wasn't sure if she was asking me, or fate, or what, but I was down with it. "Do you think we're on the list? Or do you think we were planning on going Dutch?" I asked, only half joking. "I don't know," said Marcia, "but we're the type who would have planned ahead, so why don't you see how much you have in your pockets?" I had an amount that Marcia found adequate, and she suggested I pay for us to go inside. I asked her how come she didn't check her own pocketbook to see how much she had on her, and I just got to look like I was an idiot. Inside, it was very loud, but Marcia seemed to like it there. I tried to dance however she danced, depending on the song. I had no idea what I was doing, but it was fun to not be getting chased as prey by feral mythological creatures for a few minutes, and we both laughed and had a very good time. For a while, that is. I thought I saw one of the dogmen right there in the club. It was only with my peripheral vision, but it was so real that I felt a twinge of panic even before I could turn my full attention to that area. I didn't see the dogman anymore, but there were so many people moving in every direction that I couldn't be sure it wasn't still there. This happened again and again. I must have looked like a schizo seeing demons over my shoulder. Then I noticed Marcia was doing the exact same thing. I pulled her off the dance floor and shouted in her ear as loudly as I could, "Are they really here? Or is someone playing with our heads?" I screamed. She shook her head, indicating that she couldn't hear me. I leaned directly next to her ear and bellowed out, "Did you see the dogman?" I pulled back and saw that her face looked confused. She stood on her toes and indicated she wanted to shout in my ear, so I leaned down to allow her to do so. She put her mouth to my cheek and shouted something about the church rectory, or at least that's what it sounded like to me. It was then my turn to shrug my shoulders and indicate that I couldn't hear her. Annoyed, she pirouetted around on her toes until she located an exit sign. She pointed to both of us, then that exit sign, and I nodded my head in the affirmative. Marcia grabbed my hand and began dragging me into the crowded dance floor, across to the exit door on the opposite side of the hall. The music and flashing lights were intoxicating, and it almost felt as though the floor were swaying left and right, as though we were on the high seas. Someone cut through us as we walked, and suddenly I was no longer holding her hand. She was shorter than most of the people there that night, even in those shoes, and it was immediately impossible to make out where she was in the crowd in front of me. Instead, I looked for that exit sign so that at least I would be heading in the correct direction. I thought I saw two different ones, both generally forward of my position. I kept trying to move closer to them, each person I could slip around. I wasn't looking for Marcia, only for the exit sign. I held the faith in my heart that she would be there waiting for me once I was out on the sidewalk again, where it would be quiet enough to speak. The crowd swarmed tighter around me, people too inebriated to understand that they were blocking my personal space. The crowd began jumping up and down to the beat of the song. The bass was so heavy, it felt like my heart was hammering in time with it, and now the floor beneath me swayed as the entire crowd jumped up and down and up and down, tranced out and trancing the entire building with them as they did so. I had no choice but to bounce with them, and each time I was up, I saw another one of the Dogmen. Never directly, always indirectly. One time I saw one to my extreme right. I turned my head so quickly as I came down that I think I pulled something. I got a sore neck from that, which was very distracting. The discomfort put blinders on me, and I was able to just put my head down and work that crowd. Soon, it felt like I was walking on a rug instead of a floor, and I saw it was the red carpet leading out the front door. The exit was directly in front of me. I just had to take another 2 or 3 steps and... Marcia's father pulled the car to the left on the suburban tree-lined street of private homes. "You two have fun," he chortled. Marcia and I looked at each other, then carefully leaned down to peer out the car window simultaneously. I remember already wondering if we had clonked our heads together in this timeline, but it was still real to me and her. I also noticed that my neck still hurt, even though I wasn't sure I'd ever been to that dance club in this timeline. When she and I looked outside, we saw it was a sunny day, most likely in the afternoon sometime. We were on the block that my parents lived on. I jumped out of the car and helped Marcia out too. Leaning down to thank her father for the ride, I noticed there was a newspaper on the seat of his car. I asked him if it was that day's paper or if it was old. He told me it was from yesterday. I asked him if I could have it since I wanted to read the comics. He said sure, handed it to me, and drove off. "You don't read the comics," said Marcia. "No, I don't," I agreed with her. "You know what else I don't do?" I asked. She shrugged. "I don't know what day we've just jumped to. This device, however, this device I hold in my hand, made of dead tree pulp and ink, this device shall help me ascertain this knowledge." I made a dramatic display of pointing out and reading the date off the newspaper to her as she laughed. Then I told her my magic formula. I was about to take the date given by the dead wood pulp and ink device, and I was going to add the number 1 to it. After this procedure had been performed, scientifically, I would then know the exact date we had jumped to, although I would still have no idea of which timeline's version of that date. So anyway, we walked to my house and stood outside, holding hands and looking at it. I knew we were both wondering what would be in there, waiting for us. "I don't know if I can make it till Halloween," Marcia said. "I know you can," I assured her, and we both walked inside, neither of us having the vaguest idea what fate we were walking ourselves into.
And what happened then? Find out next Saturday night. Same dog time, same dog channel. But wait, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the all-new episode of Bryan's Lycan Troubles right after this.
And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend we tell you A story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
Let's rejoin the story as Bryan's Lycan troubles continue.
Jenny clung to Bryan's huge back as the 13-foot-tall lycanthrope followed Calvin and Joe. Jenny now wondered what she had gotten herself and her afflicted husband into. They were walking back to the Halloween haunted house that she had signed her husband up to play the werewolf at. The same one he broke away from and escaped because she was unable to control him well enough to perform in front of a crowd. Why was she going back there? What good could come of it? And how much bad might happen if Bryan lost control again, especially with a lot of innocent people there. Jenny was perspiring, and her eyes were tearing up. Her conscience was gnawing at her, and it was not pleasant. When they got back to the house, she was surprised to see the cage that Bryan had broken out of to be already repaired. She knew her conscience wasn't going to let her continue with this though, so she went up to Calvin and told him she didn't think the plan was safe. She admitted that she didn't think she knew how to control Bryan in his current state. "That doesn't matter," Calvin said with a twinkle in his eye. He laughed at Jenny's confused expression, then pointed to Joe. "He knows how to control Bryan." Jenny shot Joe a look, and Joe winked at her again. She hated when he did that. Joe was not a person she trusted. She was certain that he was somehow responsible for Bryan's lycanthropy, or this particular form of it, or something. Jenny couldn't even be sure why she suspected Joe any longer, but she knew she did. Each day that progressed, her memory faded just a bit more, so she knew that eventually she would probably trust Joe if she didn't force herself to keep remembering. There was something wrong about that guy. Something that made no sense. She was certain she knew Joe back before she had discovered this haunted house show. But how could that be? It hurt to try to remember things, and Jenny spent a lot of time in discomfort in those days. She didn't want to forget, but something was forcing her to. Something. Or maybe someone. Jenny watched her husband's werewolf form get trained by the man she didn't trust. She watched as he did as he was told, when he was told. When Joe called to Jenny to come into the cage and rehearse the act, she came out of her daydream and realized she hadn't been paying enough attention to remember what her part was even supposed to be. The rehearsals went on into the night. Bryan hit his cues every time, and Jenny hit them once or twice. She was not into it, and she was not sure this was a good idea any longer. But if they actually got through all this, they'd have in their hands a nice chunk of money, enough to start a new life somewhere, away from prying eyes. But if this guy Joe had sought them out, then maybe they might never be free or safe. Maybe they would always be hunted and trailed by people who knew how to find people like Bryan. Maybe they have a homing instinct with each other, she wondered. After rehearsals, Bryan found himself reverting to human form. He was exhausted and starving. The two walked out into the trees to rest and talk as dinner was being prepared for the crew. Jenny kept bringing the conversation back to the idea of them leaving. She wanted to quit. She didn't want to go through with this act. She felt it was too dangerous and not worth the risk. Bryan argued that it was all Jenny's idea in the first place, and the two of them quarreled for a while. After some time, they noticed someone was watching them. and then they saw that it was Joe. "How long have you been listening in on our private conversation?" asked Jenny, but Bryan didn't say anything. "Look, Jen," said Joe, as he took a few sauntering steps in their direction, "you would be a lot happier if you just stopped thinking for a while." "Oh, would I?" asked Jenny. "Yep," answered Joe. "You should stop thinking and stick to what you're good at." "By the way, what are you good at?" Jenny bristled, but once again, Bryan said nothing. Jenny looked at him and noticed for the first time that he seemed confused and frightened. She asked him if anything was wrong, and he told her, I don't know." "He doesn't know, Jenny," said Joe. "Stop asking him stuff he doesn't know about. You want to know the answers to your questions? Ask me. Go ahead." Jenny asked him to be quiet, but Joe hounded her and insisted over and over again that she could ask him anything she wanted to know the answer to. "Ask me. Ask me," he shouted. "Go ahead. Ask me." And each time he said it, his voice got louder. And each time he said it, his voice got deeper, until finally it didn't even sound like him talking any longer. Jenny looked at him, but she no longer saw Joe, the man, the guy from the haunted house attraction. Now when she looked at him, it made her brain tickle inside, because this was not any longer a human being. This was now something that most everyone in this day and age would most likely refer to as a dogman. This was 10 feet tall if it was an inch, and this was a humanoid. It was a particularly hairy humanoid, but still it was not a primate or a canine. It was humanoid. Yet the head on the figure was unmistakably wolf-like or dog-like. It was colored differently than either of Bryan's Lycan forms, yet it was undeniably a dogman or werewolf-type creature. Its long, dog-like snout, its tall, pointed ears, its constant growling and angry canine sounds all underscored that whatever the creature was a mix of, that mix had to have started with a dog. And it towered over both Jenny and Bryan, panting and drooling and shedding and smelling. And they had to crane their necks to see the creature as it looked down on both of them and...
Well, don't stop there. Oh, to find out what happened next, we'll have to come back here next Saturday. Same dog time, same dog channel.
If you enjoyed this, please click like or consider subscribing. Remember to click the bell icon or you won't get notifications. If you want to listen to Bigfoot's secret uncensored story each Sunday, just go to peterbernard.com and become a paid subscriber. See you tomorrow. Same dog time, same dog channel.
Come back for more scary stories.